Okay, welcome everyone. So tonight we are taking a look at Daniel chapter 10, and it's titled Daniel's Disturbing Vision of an Angelic Man. Now, the closing scriptures in the book of Daniel, forming chapters 10 through 12, all go together, and they should be studied together, and that's the approach we will be taking. In Daniel chapter 10, it will reveal very much to us about the spiritual realm that spills over into the physical realm and actually becomes reality. So in Daniel chapter 10, it makes it very clear that there are powers and principalities behind every nation. And Satan's kingdom, if you will, has ranks. So, same way as in the military, and the same way as Yahweh's kingdom, it has ranks. And in Daniel 10, we see those principalities and powers use man's flesh via beast kings and beast kingdoms to carry out Satan's will. We have seen the main players so far being Babylon, Media Persia, Greece, and Rome. We have seen the transmutation of these beast kingdoms, meaning they have merged, they have intertwined with each other, and we've seen these beasts change from bears to rams and he-goats. So we see them changing constantly. And ultimately, they're going to form one new beast kingdom, and that is recorded in Revelation 17. So what exactly is Satan's will? Well, the following scripture in Isaiah 14 says it all. And it shall be in the day Yahweh gives you rest from your sorrow and from your trouble and the hard service in which you were made to serve, that you shall take up this proverb against the sovereign of Babel and say, how the oppressor has ceased, the gold gatherer ceased. Yahweh has broken the staff of the wrong, the scepter of the rulers. He who struck the people in wrath with ceaseless blows, he who ruled the nations in displeasure, is persecuted and no one restrains. All the earth is at rest and at peace. They shall break forth into singing. Even the cypress trees rejoice over you and the cedars of Lebanon, saying, since you were cut down, no woodcutter has come up against us. Sheol from beneath is excited about you to meet you at your coming. It stirs up the dead for you, all the chief ones of the earth. It has raised up from their thrones all the sovereigns of the nations. All of them respond and say to you, have you also become as weak as we? Have you become like us? Your arrogance has been brought down to Sheol, and the sound of your stringed instruments. The maggot is spread under you, and worms cover you. How you have fallen from the heavens, O Hallel, son of the morning. You have been cut down to the ground, you who laid low the nations. And we see Hallel in the footnote relates to the shining one. And of course, we remember the shining one deceived Eve in the Garden of Eden. Verse 13. For you have said in your heart, let me go up to the heavens. Let me raise my throne above the stars of El, and let me sit in the mount of appointment on the sides of the north. Let me go up above the heights of the clouds. Let me be like the Most High. But you are brought down to Sheol, to the sides of the pit. Those who see you stare at you and ponder over you, saying, is this the man who made the earth tremble, who shook rains, who made the world as a wilderness and destroyed its cities, who would not open the house of his prisoners? All the sovereigns of the nations, all of them were laid in esteem, every one in his own house. But you have been thrown from your burial site like an abominable branch, like the garment of those who are killed, thrust through with a sword, who go down to the stones of the pit, like a trampled corpse. You are not joined with them in the burial place, for you have destroyed your land and killed your people. Let the seed of evildoers never be mentioned. Prepare his children for slaughter because of the crookedness of their fathers, lest they rise up and possess the land and fill the face of the world with cities. And I shall rise up against them, declares Yahweh of hosts, and shall cut off from Babel the name and remnant and offspring and descendant, declares Yahweh. And I shall make it a possession for the porcupine and marshes of muddy water, and shall sweep it with the broom of destruction, declares Yahweh of hosts. The prophetic word coming to Daniel in Daniel chapter 10 was and is very important. In essence, it's top secret classified information, if you will. Why else would Yahweh's angelic host be intercepted in battle by the prince of Persia? Now, when we say prince of Persia, think principality, because in Satan's ranks, the principalities are the highest rank. And then you have the powers, and then you have the rulers of darkness, which are demons, and spiritual wickedness in heavenly places, which are also demons. Now, that's important to know because Yahweh has given us authority over demonic spirits. But when it comes to principalities and powers, I have learned through spiritual warfare that we are to ask Yahweh to rebuke them. So we can stand our ground, we can speak his word against powers and principalities, but we leave the rebukes, if you will, from Yahweh and say, like the Archangel Michael says, or Gabriel said, Yahweh rebuke you. So Yahweh's angelic hosts were intercepted in battle by the principality of Persia. And later would be intercepted with the prince of Greece, again, a principality. This was an intense battle in which the Archangel Michael needed to come as a reinforcement. Why? Because it was no ordinary principality that the angel was up against. It was the head of the rule of Persia, and not only the head of the rule of Persia and kings, plural, of Persia, which required the backup of Michael as one of the chief heads of Yahweh's host to assist. We read about that in Daniel 10:13. But the head of the rule of Persia withstood me 21 days. That was an intense battle. That was that they were doing everything they could to prevent Yahweh's angelic messengers from reaching Daniel with this very important message, not only for him, but for us. And that is why we come to the table every Tuesday night and study the book of Daniel for such a time as this, and see Michael, one of the chief heads, came to help me, for I had been left alone there with the sovereigns of Persia. With that being said, the book of Daniel is extremely important for us to study and understand. And I've already stated why that is, because it is the message given to us for the end of days in which we presently live. Now, so far in our study book, the book of Daniel, on page 233, we have gone through vision 1 in Daniel 2, vision 2 in Daniel 7, and vision 3 in Daniel 8. And for the rest of the book of Daniel, we will do the last structure chart for chapters 10 through 12. In Daniel chapter 8, it was clearly defined that the ram was the prince of Persia. And within the book of Daniel, it's the second kingdom, Medo-Persia. And historically, Darius and Cyrus ruled. Also in chapter 8, we see the he-goat identified as the prince of Greece, who would conquer Medo-Persia. And that would be Alexander the Great historically. And we know Alexander the Great dies at a young age, and his 4 generals rise up and take over. Now, that's historically, but we also know these principalities and these prophecies are going to play out again in our day, and we are going to take a look at that. Now, previously I asked the question, can we see the spirit of Esau in the he-goat of Greece? Now, why do I bring up Esau? Because in the end of days, the book of Revelation is basically a battle between good and evil. We all know that and see that. But it's also a battle between Esau and Jacob, and Jacob was renamed Israel. So we don't need to lose sight of that, because Esau likes to hide in the background. And we also know Satan's symbol is also associated with the goat. In Daniel 8:5, we read, and as I was considering, behold, an he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground, and the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. So it was a powerful king with powerful entities behind it. And in Daniel 8:8, therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and for it came up 4 notable ones toward the 4 winds of heaven. And as I said, historically, that was representing Alexander the Great and the 4 generals that rose up after him. But these things will play out again. Previously, we defined he-goat, Seir, and he-goat is H8163. It's defined as hairy, he-goat, buck. As sacrificial animal, satire may refer to a demon-possessed goat like the swine of Gadara. We need to keep in mind that Esau His name, Esau, is synonymous with Edom and Mount Seir. Seir, the man, in Genesis 27:11, it reads, "And Jacob said to Rebekah, his mother, Behold, Esau, my brother, is a hairy man, and I am a smooth man." Again, H8163, which we just defined and read. Now, Seir is a place as well, Edom. In Genesis 32:3, "And Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau his brother unto the land of Seir," H8165, the country of Edom, formed like H8163, rough, Seir, a mountain of Idumea and its aboriginal occupants. But we also see it formed like H8163, which we just defined. Again, hairy, he-goat, sacrificial animal, satire, may refer to a demon-possessed goat, like the swine of Gadara. In Proverbs 23:7, it reads, "For as he thinketh," thinketh means sha'ar, "in his heart, so is he. Eat and drink, saith he to thee, but his heart is not with thee." The root verb sha'ar means to calculate or reckon, as in Proverbs 23:7. Its sole derivative is the masculine noun meaning measure. In Revelation 13, we read, "Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Count is the word sephizo, and it means to count with pebbles, to compute, to calculate, reckon, to give one's vote by casting a pebble into the urn, to decide by voting. You see voting come into play in Genesis 36. This is the time that Esau is integrating with the Ishmaelites, and Esau overtakes the Horites. So in Genesis 36, we see voting introduced, and we see people assigned to positions rather than through heritage. Because as I shared, Esau usurped the Ishmaelites and the Horites. And so we see not so many begots anymore. The term is exchanged for terms like dukes or chiefs, because they are assigned or they are voted in. So a lot of that comes from Esau biblically. Is there a flaunting of Esau today? I couldn't help but think that there very well could be. In our study books, Charlene did a comparison of papal supremacy #1 and papal supremacy #2. This is on page 154 of your books. If someone would read for me 1 through 10 on papal supremacy #1, because we know Rome has a role all the way down to the 10 toes in the statue, because the iron is always present. So we have to be very mindful of the papal supremacies. Okay, would someone like to read 1 through 10, please?
This is to do with the fifth kingdom. Rise from the fall of pagan imperial Rome, AD 476 to 538. roots out, number 2, roots out 3 tribes of Arianism. Number 3, rules 1260 years from AD 538 to 1798. Number 4, bishops gain control in Old Europe. Number 5, use of Jesuit order to counter the Reformation. Number 6, gains obvious sense of Caesars / emperors through manipulation and coercion. Number 7, church and state combined in Old Europe. Number 8, changes times and laws. Number 9, calling backslidden members back to the mother church. And 10, Mary worship instituted in the Roman Catholic Church.
Thank you, Kathleen. And we know anytime there's a church and state combination, what follows that are death decrees. And they are working very diligently in our very day to once again combine church and state. And then Charlene recorded about papal supremacy number 2. And that supremacy rises from AD 1798 to 1801 and waxes exceedingly great from 1801 to present. And the papal system hasn't slowed down at all. So we know it rises from the wound of the little horn in AD 1798 to AD 1801, historically, when Pope Pius VII signed a concordant with Napoleon to reinstate the Catholic religion back into France. Roots out atheism in France with the AD 1801 concordant between Pope Pius VII and Napoleon. Later in 1989, communism is rooted out in Russia and the European bloc. Next to be subjugated will be the Protestant nations and the remainder of godless nations around the world, Daniel 11:41 through 43. Begins to rule through secret societies and atheistic communistic countries, i.e. Russia. Popes gain world respect through political manipulation, Vatican councils, and the ecclesiastical encyclicas. And also she put C Appendix 11A, page 352, because they most certainly put out those encyclicals left and right. The use of the Illuminati, Communist Manifesto, and many secret societies to destroy Christianity, because that's the goal. Gains respect of world political and religious leaders. 7, papal church and communist states work together. Should those two things be working together? A papal church and communist states work together? There's your sign. Conditions the nations to accept future changes of times and laws on a universal basis. Calling Protestant churches back to the mother church. We see that today big time. And of course, mother goddess worship, Mary worshiped for the world. Now, Mary most certainly was blessed to be chosen to be the surrogate mother of Yahushua HaMashiach, but Mary would have never, ever wanted to be worshiped. She is not a deity. So as Kathleen was sharing, in our books, we have papal supremacy number 1 showing as the 5th kingdom historically, and also the papal supremacy number 2 as the 6th kingdom. I've also added my list to the right to let us know that the numbering system in our study book is within the book of Daniel. But this list that I proposed to the right starts before the book of Daniel, because I include Egypt and of course Assyria, where the exiles of Israel were taken to. And then starting in Daniel, I add Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. And the papal supremacies I put as subcategories of Rome. But even though I have them listed here, we must understand the iron is in Mystery Babylon. The iron continues all the way down to the last beast, because pretty much after Rome, and we know that Rome was represented by the iron legs, but as it filters down, it goes into the feet, and the feet are mixed with iron and clay all the way down to the toes. So papal supremacy has a major role in the end of days. Pope Francis's newest encyclical is a papal warning about a world going backward. So they are still pushing out these encyclical letters to their congregants. And just because the hierarchy of the papal system is not of Yahweh, I'm not saying those that have been raised in Catholicism and that believe in their heart of the true Yahusha, I'm not including them in this. However, I would share with them that in Yahweh's word, he says, "Come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins." And her sins have been extremely prominent. And you would literally have to be blind and ignorant and not be able to comprehend nor see how evil this organization has been. And there's the encyclical name Fratelli Tutti, or brothers all. So this one is pushing fraternity. This one is pushing let's all become one. And the previous one was Laudato Si, address responsibility for the environment, climate change and development. His first Lumen Fidei, the Light of Faith, released in 2013, months after he became Pope, was written mostly by Benedict XVI with only a few changes. So this is what we just read here in section number 4. Popes gain world respect through political manipulation, Vatican councils, and ecclesiastical encyclicals, right there. In Revelation 17:8, because I want us to try to start bringing all that we've learned together. I want this to make sense to us. Do I have this perfectly figured out? Probably not, but I'll get you pretty close. All right. So Revelation 17:8, the beast that you saw was and is not, and is about to come up out of the pit of the deep and goes to destruction. Now, number one, be sure to understand that the beast is not the dragon. The dragon is Satan. We see mention of this beast out of the pit elsewhere. In Revelation 9:11, we read, "And they have over them a sovereign, the messenger of the pit of the deep, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon, but in Greek, he has the name Apollyon." And in Revelation 11:7, "And when they have ended their witness," speaking of the two witnesses, which very well may be the Church of Philadelphia and the Church of Smyrna, which very well may be us, and which very well may be be led by the spirit of Elijah and the spirit of Moses, because we know in Acts 1:8, we are his witnesses. So in Revelation 11:7, and when they, the two witnesses, have ended their witness, the beast coming up out of the pit of the deep shall fight against them and overcome them and kill them. But the scripture goes on to say that they'll lie dead in the street for 3.5 days, and then they're called up to Elohim in heaven. In Daniel 12:1, we also read of Michael standing up. Now at that time, Michael shall stand up, the great head who is standing over the sons of your people, and there shall be a time of distress, such as never was since there was a nation until that time. And at that time, your people shall be delivered, every one who is found written in the book of life. All right, so the beast that you saw was and is not, and is about to come up out of the pit of the deep and goes to destruction. So we're about to read about the riddle of Revelation 17. And those dwelling on the earth whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world shall marvel when they see the beast that was and is not and yet is. Here is the mind having wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. Remember, it says the woman sits on 7 heads or 7 mountains. I define the 7 mountains as the 7 continents of the world. And there are 7 sovereigns. 5 have fallen. Now we have to keep in mind that John the Revelator is the author of Revelation 17. 5 have fallen. Those 5, in my understanding, would be Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, and Greece. And 1 is. The one that was at the time of John the Revelator was Rome. So that's who the king was, the beast kingdom was, Rome, during the days of John the Revelator. And the other has not yet come. And when he comes, he has to remain a little while. So, number 7, I see as Mystery Babylon. We see that those in present day Israel that usurped the name Israel, or that nation is being led by those that say they are Jews and are not, and they're following the Babylonian Talmud and occupy the present land there. We also know that by the time you start blending this Revelation 17 beast together, it's just not made up of one component, because we know the iron from the Rome kingdom is filtering down into all of this. And we know the whore that rides the beast will be killed. And we will look at why and see how Catholicism and Judaism is blended into what can be termed as a crypto-Jewish priesthood. Now keep in mind Revelation 17:18, it says, and the woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. And earlier in Revelation, the great city is identified as Jerusalem. So this mystery Babylon system of present day Israel, which that is in the promised land, and that is where they are ruling from with their Babylonian Talmud, has to remain a little while. And the beast that was and is not is himself also the eighth, and is of the seven, and goes to destruction. The eighth, we will see the beast, Esau, beast man, and beast kingdom rising to power and being demonically influenced by Satan. The beast of Revelation 17 is also inclusive of Rome. It's inclusive of Edomites, Esau. The clay is mankind, inclusive of the remnant of the true Israel born from above. So true believers are going to be caught up in this system of iron and clay, of these beast kingdoms rising. And just give me a minute and I will develop this further so it will all make sense. We will see the Assyrian rise. Now, if you in your Bible do a search on the Assyrian, you'll get several hits. For instance, you could just start with Micah chapter 5, verse 5 and 6. So more than likely, we are going to see Esau rise up through the Islamic nations. But make no mistake, there's still a connection to Rome, and there's still a connection to Judaism. In the book, Solving the Mystery of Babylon the Great, Tracking the Beast from the Synagogue, Tracking the Beast from the Synagogue to the Vatican by Edward Hendry, he brings out that on page 119, the Jewish hierarchy understands that the Catholic Church is not Christian, but is rather a Gentile front for a Judaic Babylonian religion, and so do not act contrary to the Roman practice. So in other words, they're all in the same boat. Page 122, the Jesuit order is a crypto-Jewish priesthood. And as such, Jews have a long history of membership in the Jesuit order. Now, when I say Jews in this context, I'm saying those that say they are Jews and are not. Page 126, the Vatican is both a sovereign state and the headquarters for a world religion. This structure was patterned upon Babylonian Judaic principles. Babylon is in the Middle East. Babylonian Judaic principles. These insights make it clear that when we speak of popes and Catholicism, we must connect these terms to a crypto-Jewish priesthood and a Judaic Babylonian religion. They are essentially one, aiming to bring all into a one world religion, even into Chrislam, which is a combination of so-called Christendom and Islam. Believers within these man-made religious systems should obey Yahusha and heed his words to come out of her, my people. Here in February 4th, 2019, we saw where the Pope and the Grand Imam signed historic pledge of fraternity that brings us back to his encyclical, bringing all the world together in the United Arab Emirates. So we see the combination of the papal system and also reaching out to Islam. The Revelation 17 beast, I cannot say enough about, is a conglomerate, one new beast man, and beast kingdom. The color is red, which signifies Esau is within and behind this beast system rising, just as believers in Yahushua HaMashiach make up the one new man, Israel. So we see the beast man kingdom of Esau rising. And the Revelation 17 beast makes up all of these, because we see the great and dreadful beast included. We see the lion, we see the leopard, we see the bear, and so forth. And we see the woman riding the beast. And the woman they're riding on 7 mountains, the 7 continents. They're ruling from Israel, Jerusalem, because their desire is to take the place of Yahweh. The whore that rides the beast will be killed. That's the crypto-Jewish priesthood ruling and reigning from Jerusalem. Previously, we defined what the beast is. How do you define a beast nation? A biblical beast is a foreign nation that has conquered and occupied Jerusalem. So we know there's gobs and gobs of nations, but what makes a beast nation is that it has conquered and occupied Jerusalem. A biblical beast is also a man. We saw that take place with Nebuchadnezzar in chapter 4. The governmental beast system is also along those same lines. In Daniel 7, verse 2 and 3, Daniel spoke and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of the heaven strove upon the great sea, and 4 great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. So they come up from the sea of people, nations, and tongues. And they're very diverse. But in Revelation 17, they come together for the common cause. Beast kings and kingdoms have conquered and occupied Jerusalem and or his people for millenniums, but the promised land belongs to Yahweh, and he is returning for his people, for his land, and for his creation. The second beast in Revelation 13, the first beast in Revelation 13 is the political governmental system. Now, some think the first beast is connected by the papal supremacy. Personally, I connect the papal supremacy beast to the second beast, the false prophet beast, if you will. So you'll get a couple of different viewpoints on that. But hey, we're studying these things out, and I'm giving you some different perspectives. So it says, and I saw another beast coming up out of the earth. Now, the first beast came up out of the sea, okay? This one comes up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. And he exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he's going to do great signs. He's going to make fire come down from the heaven on the earth before men. And through technology, they can already do that with direct energy weapons. And he leads astray those dwelling on the earth because of those signs which he was given to do before the beast, saying to those dwelling on the earth to make an image to the beast who was wounded by the sword, yet lived. And there was given to him to give spirit to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast, like artificial intelligence, should both speak and cause to be killed as many as would not worship the image of the beast, which this very well may be correlating to the abomination of desolation that lays waste incredibly. And it would be just like them to have this image of the beast do all their dirty work, because they like to do everything, quote unquote, legally, so they can look like the blood is not on their hands. And he causes all, both small and great, and rich and poor, and free and slave, to be given a mark upon their right hand or upon their foreheads, and that no one should be able to buy or sell except he that has the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. I mean, it's already getting to the point that you pretty much have trouble buying or selling unless you're wearing a mask. What follows the mask is the mark. Here is the wisdom. He who has understanding, let him calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. In Revelation 19, we're going to see the armies in the heaven come and fight against the beast. They are dressed in fine linen, white and clean, and they followed him, meaning Yahushua HaMashiach, on white horses. And out of the mouth of Yahushua, goes a sharp sword. And we know the sword represents his word, that with it, he should smite the nations. All he has to do is speak it. And he shall shepherd them with a rod of iron, and he treads the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of El Shaddai. And on his robe and on his thigh he has a name written, Sovereign of Sovereigns and Master of Masters. And thigh, in the footnote, means possibly a flag, like an ensign, like a lead banner in the wilderness encampments. And I saw one messenger standing in the sun, and he cried with a loud voice, saying to all the birds that fly in the mid-heaven, come and gather together for the supper of the great Elohim, to eat the flesh of the sovereigns, and the flesh of commanders, and the flesh of strong ones, and the flesh of horses and those who sit on them, and the flesh of all people, free and slave, both small and great. And I saw the beast and the sovereigns of the earth and their armies gathered together to fight him who sat on the horse and his army. Remember, the beast even rises up against Yahushua HaMashiach. So this is when the beast does that. And the beast was seized. Oh, it doesn't seem like it took him very long. It doesn't seem like Yahushua had much of a problem seizing the beast. It goes from the beast rising against the armies of heaven and Yahushua HaMashiach himself to boom, right here, the beast was seized. And with him, the false prophet. So in Revelation 13, we have the beast number 1, and the beast number 2, the false prophet of Revelation 13, who worked signs in his presence, by which he led astray those who received the mark of the beast and those who worshiped his image. Great falling away there. The two, who? The two, the beast and the false prophet. But Satan isn't in this equation right here. The two were thrown alive into the lake of fire burning with sulfur. And the rest were killed with the sword, which came from the mouth of him who sat on the horse. Just his word, the sword of his word, which came from the mouth of him who sat on the horse, and all the birds were filled with their flesh. So Kimberly Rogers-Brown, and I've shared this YouTube video she's done called The Enemy We Face, brings out a lot of the elements about Islam that we should be mindful of. They worship via the name Allah. which means curse, H422, 423, a primitive root properly to adjure, that is usually in a bad sense, imprecate, adjure, curse, swear. And Bismillah, we've all seen these Arabic phrases and writings. A Bismillah is a phrase in Arabic meaning in the name of God, their God. It is also the first word in the Quran and refers to the Quran's opening phrase, the Bismillah. Now, the Ottoman Empire, we have to be mindful that the Ottoman Empire was once very, very strong. And just in this map from 1299 to 1758 AD. And oh, well, wow, looky there. What territory did they cover at that time? Oh, the Promised Land, right? Israel. Okay, so they should be considered a beast kingdom. Hold that thought. All right, their governing bodies are called caliphates. And they are expecting, and this is their list, and Kimberly sees them as the seventh beast. I see the seventh beast as Mystery Babylon, present day Israel. So we see how there's a few differences, but in essence, we all kind of get on the same page. So through Islam, they're expecting a prophesied Mahdi. Kimberly also brings out that Muhammad's features were like Esau's. Muhammad, AD 570 to 632, the founder of the Islamic religion, was apparently fair-skinned. His face was not fat nor rounded. It was white tinged with red, very similar to how Esau was described. And then she also wondered what John saw. In the Codex Vaticanus, there was Arabic writing and Bismillahs. So when John saw this Bismillah right here that we have recorded in the Codex Vaticanus, she pondered that to be somewhat of a serpent, if you will. And this one, Bismillah, also looks like a serpent. And she pondered if he saw this, John the Revelator saw this, if he saw this like two swords from this emblem, she wondered, could it be that John saw the crossed swords and the Bismillah, which equal 666? This was food for thought, but this is also food for thought to consider that would be the eighth beast that rises. It would be the one new beast kingdom, and Esau would eventually be revealed, because this beast is a conglomerate and it's a mixture and it's satanically influenced against Yahweh's kingdom. Now, Yahweh's kingdom is open to any nation, people, and tongue that receives him as their savior and enters into covenant with him, because Yahweh doesn't want any to perish. Yahushua didn't come to condemn the world. He came to save the world. And just like we have been deceived by these man-made traditional religions, also many in the Middle East have been deceived by the same things. And it is our prayer that we see the truth and see through the lies of Satan and see how the beast kingdoms and beast rulers of this world have used people and have deceived people. We also need to keep in mind about the Turkish Khazars. I shared this clip with y'all before. I need to share it with you again. So although basically Turkic, the Khazar state bore little resemblance to the other Turkic empires of Central Eurasia. It was headed by a secluded supreme ruler of semi-religious character called a Kagan, who wielded little real power, and by tribal chieftains, each known as a beg. The state's military organization also seems to have lacked the forcefulness of those of the greater Turkic Mongol empires. The Khazars seem to have been more inclined to a sedentary way of life, building towns and fortresses, tilling the soil, and planting gardens and vineyards. Trade and the collection of tribute were major sources of income. But the most striking characteristic of the Khazars was the apparent adoption of Judaism by the Kagan and the greater part of the ruling class in about 740. The circumstances of the conversion remain obscure, the depth of their adoption of Judaism difficult to assess, but the fact itself is undisputed and unparalleled in Central Eurasian history. A few scholars have even asserted that the Judaized Khazars, which are Turkic, were the remote ancestors of many Eastern Europe and Russian Jews. Whatever the case may be, religious tolerance was practiced in the Khazar Empire, and paganism continued to flourish among the population. So there are several, even people coming from Turkey that converted, that have an Islam background, that converted to Judaism. So they also make up and could have very well become part of the Israel of Theodore Herzl, the Israel in the Middle East right now, the Israel not born from above. Believers are the Israel born from above, but the name has been usurped and applied to those that are in control of the promised land today. So we have to think a little bit more about this Ottoman Empire. Clearly based on our beast kingdom and the definitions I just reviewed, the Ottoman Empire must be included in the beast kingdom list, but where? Where? So the 6th century rise and fall of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire is named for Osman, its first ruler, who in the early 1300s expanded it from a tiny part of northwest Turkey to a slightly less tiny part. It continued expanding for about 500 years, longer than the entire history of the Roman Empire, ruling over most of the Middle East, North Africa, and Southeastern Europe for centuries. The empire, officially an Islamic state, spread the religion in Southeast Europe, but was generally tolerant of other religious groups. It was probably the last great non-European empire until it began declining in the mid-1800s, collapsed after World War I, and had its former territory in the Middle East divided up by Western Europe. So this picture of the Ottoman Empire was 1774. So where might it fit over here? Well, we have to remember that after the iron in the legs, we see iron mixed with clay. We see 1774 Ottoman Empire and inclusive of Israel. And that fits right in to this time frame right here. So we see the blended beast. And we see how Revelation 17 shows mystery Babylon, if you will, with all of these nations and leaders and governments making these agreements, coming together. And we know under Sharia law, they advocate beheadings. We know under the Noahide laws, again, they advocate beheadings. And we know through the papal system, they're advocating Sunday worship, Sunday law, and pushing for the combination of church and state, which brings on death decrees. And if we don't believe that can happen again, just look at the Dark Ages, what happened to believers then. You see, Esau, Edom, hides himself in Rome, in Mystery Babylon, which in my opinion is present day Israel, and as Turkish Khazars that converted to Judaism, whose tentacles reached into Europe and Russia. Again, a huge blending. It's important to know what the Middle East looked like in 1914. This is a pivotal year during the Middle East gradual transfer from 500 years of Ottoman rule to 50 to 100 years of European rule. Western Europe was getting richer and more powerful as it carved up Africa, including the Arab states of North Africa, into colonial possessions. Virtually the entire region was ruled outright by Europeans or Ottomans, save some parts of Iran and the Arabian Peninsula, divided into European zones of influence. When World War I ended a few years later, the rest of the defeated Ottoman Empire would be carved up among the Europeans. The lines between French, Italian, Spanish, and British rule are crucial for understanding the region today, not just because they ruled differently and imposed different policies, but because the boundaries between European empires later became the official borders of independence, whether they made sense or not. And I'm going to leave this link because you do need to review those maps. They're excellent. So that's what the Middle East looked like in 1914. I left that little map behind it. But now we need to know about the Sykes-Picot Treaty that carved up the Middle East. You hear a lot today about this treaty in which the UK and French and Russian empires secretly agreed to divide up the Ottoman Empire's last Mid-Eastern regions among themselves. Crucially, the borders between the French and British zones later became the borders between Iraq, Syria, and Jordan, because those later independent states had largely arbitrary borders that forced disparate ethnic and religious groups together. And because those groups are still in terrible conflict with one another, Sykes-Picot is often cited as a cause of warfare and violence and extremism in the Middle East. But scholars are still debating this theory, which may be too simple to be true. So the Sykes-Picot Treaty, you see this territory is French control, and the line goes out and down along the border of Syria and Iraq, and also the British control border and the French control border also forms the border of Iran. And then it goes down and also forms the border of Jordan. So we see British control here, a little smidgen there. We see the yellow part is international control, which probably involves the United Nations. And then we see Israel here. And so we see how now French and British control is intermingled in forming this conglomerate beast and definitely also have a role. So this is how I see it will possibly play out. The beast kingdoms join as one beast man, Esau, in Revelation 17. So just think about this beast, the woman riding the beast in Revelation 17 with the color red being the beast man rising. But we know there's going to be a lethal uprising against the whore riding the beast. Now, this is a timeline I put together just to keep us all on the same page. This timeline covers 7 years. And why does it cover 7 years? Based on Daniel 9:27. And you're going to hear some teachers say, well, I don't believe in the 7 years. I only believe in the 3.5 years. And people that believe in the 7 years, they quote from Daniel 9:27. Well, I'm one that quotes from 9:27. And my follow-up question would be, well, if people don't believe in the 7 years, then what are they going to do with this 2,300-day timeline? Because that takes up most of the 7 years. So Daniel 9:27 is where we get the 7-year timeline. At least that's where I get it. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. All right here in the midst of the week, he's going to cause the sacrifice because the crypto-Jewish false Messiah will be ushered in. The animal sacrifices will be reinstituted. It can be on an altar. It doesn't require that their quote unquote third temple be built. So that in itself will be an abomination. But in addition to the animal sacrifices, the oblation causes the oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate, even until the end, the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. So it starts off the 7-year agreement or covenant will take place. It takes it about 7 to 8 months to really kick in, if you will. And that's where we see the 2,300 days beginning, which covers about 6 years and 4 months. And this covers both the daily and the desolation. Where do we get that? We get that from Daniel 8:13 and 14. Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint which spoke, how long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice, right here, and the transgression of desolation, right here, because those sacrifices are altered, they're transmuted, and abominations of desolations begin, and he destroys greatly. And this is probably where the beheadings come into play, to give both the sanctuary and the host, the believers, to be trodden underfoot. And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. So if we also keep in mind, and we have to keep in mind the feast days, Yahweh's Moedim play heavily in the end of days. Now, each year there's 7 Moedims. So for the first half of these 7 years, we'll have 3.5 years worth of feast. And keep in mind, I see the 2 witnesses in this first half. The reason being is that after they finish their witnessing, the beast rises out of the pit and kills them. So the beast isn't out of the pit until they end their witness. That's why I put them in this first half. So possibly the two witnesses are alerting the bride, the believers, starting, let's say, at Passover. And so that first cycle is completed. Then we see another feast cycle and the third feast cycle. And then we have half a feast ends at Pentecost, where the two loaves or the two witnesses become one and are called up to heaven. We see a type and shadow of that in Revelation 11:11 and 11:12. The witnesses, the two witnesses, are called up to heaven. Then the latter half would pick up with the rest of that fourth feast cycle and would pick up starting with the trumpets and would go on with the Day of Atonement and Sukkot, which would make the fourth feast cycle. Then we'd have another fifth feast cycle, sixth feast cycle, and then the last feast cycle would bring us to the Day of Atonement, which would be right here at the very end, which would be followed by Sukkot and the eighth great day. So the Day of Atonement is at the very last, the time of judgment is at the very last of this 7-year period. And Sukkot is when Satan is bound for 1,000 years and the marriage supper of the Lamb takes place. And I should have changed that. That's the 7th millennium, not the 8th. The groom doesn't go to war because the 7th is the Shabbat, Sabbath rest. Now, we talked about the beast and the false prophet being thrown into the pit, the fiery pit. But that's not Satan, because Satan is bound for 1,000 years during the 7th millennium, if you will, during the marriage supper of the Lamb. And we read, and when the 1,000 years have ended, Satan shall be released from his prison, and he shall go out to lead the nations astray, which are in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog. Oh, really? Okay, so Satan is bound for 1,000 years. Then he's released from his prison right here at the tip of the green arrow. And he shall go out to lead the nations astray, which are in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog. So keep that in mind. So while the marriage supper of the Lamb is taking place with Yahushua HaMashiach, there are still nations present on the four corners of the earth. Because we know that because Satan, when he's released, he goes and leads the nations astray, which are in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together for battle, whose number is as the sand of the sea. And they come up over the breadth of the earth and surround the camp of the set apart ones and the beloved city. So I'll get into this, but during this time period, I believe the city of Jerusalem, the city of Jerusalem, the new Jerusalem from above, can be seen in the first heaven from earth, but it does not set down on the earth. And that is where these set apart ones are, and they're in the beloved cities. They are the living stones of the beloved city. And so Satan and the nations come up over the breadth of the earth and surrounded the camp of the set apart ones and the beloved city. And fire came down from Elohim out of the heaven and consumed them. It's a very short battle because Satan is grounded. His wings have been clipped. He was cast down to earth midway in Revelation 12, and he no longer had permission to come up in the second heaven or in the third heaven, and not before Yahweh ever again. So it's very quick that Elohim consumes him. And the devil who led them astray was thrown into the lake of fire and sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet are, and they shall be tortured day and night forever and ever. So we're going to look at this more. We're going to repeat these timelines because we have to understand that the beast and the false prophet are cast into the lake of fire here, and Satan is not cast into it until after he's bound for 1,000 years. And this is interesting too. Judgment before the great white throne. And I saw a great white throne and him who was sitting on it, from whose face the earth and the heaven fled away, and no place was found for them. And I saw the dead. The dead are not those that believe in Yahushua HaMashiach. This is the dead that never believed in Yahushua HaMashiach, small and great, standing before the throne, and books were opened. And another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged from what was written in the books according to their works. And the sea gave up the dead who were in it, and death and Sheol gave up the dead who were in them, and they were judged, each one according to his works. Believers are not judged according to their works. They are saved by grace through faith. Believers do not appear before the great white throne judgment. Believers appear before the Bema Seat judgment, which only judges what they did in their body as his ambassadors on earth. And they get rewards for their service to Yahushua and Yahweh. And it says, and death and Sheol were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death. And if anyone was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. So keep tracking with me here. So then, after all of that, then the 8th day of new beginnings, which that's the 8th millennium, this is a typo right here, is when the new heaven and earth will be created. Now, keep tracking with me. In Revelation 20, it says, and I saw thrones, and they sat on them, and judgment was given to them. I mean, his kingdom of priests are going to be judging the nations. And the lives of those who had been beheaded because of the witness they bore to Yahushua, because of the word of Elohim, and who did not worship the beast nor his image, and did not receive his mark upon their foreheads or upon their hands, and they lived and reigned with Messiah for 1,000 years. So his set apart ones, those that didn't receive the mark, some were martyred. They are ruling and reigning with Yahushua for 1,000 years. And the rest of the dead did not come to life until the 1,000 years were ended. Oh, what? Let's read that one again. All right, let's start up here at and. And I'm going to skip this parentheses this time. And they lived and reigned with Messiah for 1,000 years. This is the first resurrection. Because later it says, then, and the rest of the dead did not come to life until the 1,000 years were ended. Now, that's a lot to chew on, but we have to understand that the marriage supper of the Lamb is taking place when we tabernacle, when we Sukkot at the Feast of Tabernacles with Yahusha, our groom. And when a groom is married in the Jewish tradition, that groom would not go to war for a year. And we know a day is like 1,000 years. And so he's with his bride. And then the rest of the story is completed when Satan is loosed here. So what is occurring prior to this final 7 years? What is occurring from this mark here, not looking at our timeline anymore, but what is occurring prior to the final 7 years? What are the birth pangs like? Well, this is where I see this he-goat and this ram coming into the picture. This seems, in my understanding, to be taking place before this agreement, before this peace agreement kicks off this 7 last years. We see the alliances made through the Noahide laws, cloaked as U.S. Education Day, signed into public law U.S. 10214 in 1991, which in the subcategories can behead someone with one witness for saying the name of Yahusha or Jesus the Messiah. That is on the books, not activated, not being enforced, but it's on the books. We recently saw where President Trump gave Benjamin Netanyahu the key to the White House of the United States and gave the heart of the people of the United States to Benjamin Netanyahu. Excuse me, you can't give my heart to anybody. And what is one president of one nation doing, given the key to the nation's capital to another head of another nation? So as we approach this 7 years, the last 7 years, we're going to see kingdom rise against kingdom. We see the Sykes-Picot Treaty and how the French are involved, how Britain is involved, and how there's some international control here. So if World War III occurs prior to the 7-year agreement, it may look something like this. This he-goat with a mighty horn, which rather is shaped like Israel, and has a lot of power, big time muscle behind this horn, meaning the superpower of the United States, also the United Nations, also the WHO, coming against the ram, Medo-Persia. We're going to look at Medo-Persia. But this Sykes-Picot Agreement of 1916 had its 100th anniversary in 2016. So leading up to the centenary, meaning 100th year of Sykes-Picot in 2016, great interest was generated among the media and academia concerning the long-term effects of the agreement. The agreement is frequently cited as having created artificial borders in the Middle East without any regards to ethnic or sectarian characteristics, which has resulted in endless conflict. The extent to which Sykes-Picot actually shaped the borders of the modern Middle East is disputed. The Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, ISIL, claims one of the goals of its insurgency is to reverse the effects of the Sykes-Picot Agreement for the purpose of building a united Islamic State. This is not the first border. This is not the first border we will break. Just mute your mics. This is not the first border we will break. We will break other borders, a jihadist from the ISIL warned in a video titled End of Sykes-Picot. ISIL's former leader, al-Baghdadi, in July 2014 speech at the Great Mosque al-Nuri in Mosul, vowed that this blessed advance will not stop until we hit the last nail in the coffin of the Sykes-Picot conspiracy. Former French Prime Minister Dominique de Villepin presented a similar geopolitical analysis in an editorial contribution for the French newspaper Le Monde. So we see nations in the end of days. Yahusha told us nations would rise against nation. The United Nations Security Council consists of 10 elected members and 5 permanent members. We have China, the United States, France, the United Kingdom, and the Russian Federation. But, you know, I always looked at that list and I said, you know, someone's missing. Someone's missing. But, you know, they're not really missing because the U.S. is the wings of Israel. They have become so close that personally, in the end of days, when we speak of the lion with wings, I've shared this with y'all before, that Jerusalem has been called Ariel in Isaiah 29 because of the lion-like men that make her up. And the US has been the wings of Israel. And there's so many congressmen with dual citizenship between Israel and the United States. That in itself should not be. But these are things that I believe we should be very mindful of, because is it possible when Israel has all the power and all of her ducks in a row and other nations coming also to support her, will the United States be the wings that are clipped? Now, it's important to understand the ram. So this map will help us understand the ram, which is Medo-Persia. And we looked at this before because Daniel was by the river Ulai, and he was also by the Tigris River. And that is right here between Iraq and Iran. So we have to understand the Sunni and the Shiite divide. The story of Islam's division between Sunni and Shia started with the Prophet Muhammad's death in 632. There was a power struggle over who would succeed him in ruling the Islamic Caliphate, with most Muslims wanting to elect the next leader, but some arguing that power should go by divine birthright to Muhammad's son-in-law, Ali. That pro-Ali faction was known as the partisans of Ali, or Shia Atu Ali, in Arabic, hence Shia. Ali's eventual ascension to the throne sparked a civil war, which he and his partisans lost. The Shia held on to the idea that Ali was the rightful successor, and grew into an entirely separate branch of Islam. Today, about 10 to 15% of Muslims worldwide are Shia. They are the majority group in Iran and Iraq only, while most Muslims are Sunni. Sunni roughly means tradition. Today, that religious division is again a political one as well. It's a struggle for regional influence between Shia political powers led by Iran versus Sunni political powers led by Saudi Arabia. The struggle looks an awful lot like a regional Cold War with proxy battles in Syria and elsewhere. So you can see the mostly Shia are the yellow and the gray are mostly Sunni. And there's a huge conflict between the two. Who is coming against, being come against the most in recent days? We have Iran, we have Lebanon and Syria, even though Syria looks to be mostly Sunni. We have Afghanistan, Pakistan looks like to have a lot of Shia, not Sunni, Shia. And Bahrain just signed on to the Abraham Accord, and they are Shia. You see, there's a big push. The RAM, it seems to be that the RAM is Iran, possibly will be part of Iraq. See the Shia in Iraq, Lebanon, some of these other Shia nations holding out. They're holding out against this Abraham Accord. They seem to be the RAM. And so there was something interesting that Shauna shared in her presentations. She said, not that she's supporting the Shiite nations, but the symbology of the ram. A ram can be a protector of the sheep. So is it possible that we know that Yahweh can use believers, and he also can use beast kingdoms to hold back the ultimate beast? So is it possible that the Ram Nation for a season is holding back even a worse beast, the he-goat? So this is something for us to ponder. So this is what I want to share next, is what the latter 3.5 years may look like. The war switches now. See, we just saw how nations would be rising against nations prior to the 7-year tribulation period, and the last half being the Great Tribulation. But what does it look like once this 2,300-day timeline begins? Once this begins, we're going to see a different kind of war. It's now going to be a war between good and evil. It's going to be a war against Yahweh's set apart ones and the mighty men. And the set apart ones are considered Israel, those born from above. And this is where the war between Esau and Jacob, Israel, will play out in the last days. So the latter half of the 3.5 years, the Great Tribulation, we will see the leader of dark countenance rise up. This is going to happen when the agreement is broken halfway through the 7 years, we're going to see the Assyrian rise, Esau, if you will, through the Mahdi, when the beast has come up out of the pit, has killed the two prophets that we're witnessing, and we know that this one that is very dark is influenced and empowered by demonic spirits. In Revelation 17:12, and the 10 horns which you saw are 10 sovereigns who have not yet received a reign, but receive authority as sovereigns with the beast for 1 hour. In an Islamic publication, this is how they have it mapped out, and they have 10 kings mapped out. So what is going on here with this beast rising? Well, if the whore has been killed, there are a lot of nations right here. There are a lot of nations with their little beast heads flapping around. Now, granted, when the superpower nation takes a fatal blow, which equates to Alexander the Great, there will be 4 other nations rise up, but they won't be as strong as that superpower nation, and probably will be several of those that I reviewed that make up the Permanent Security Council of the UN. But eventually there will be a void, and this beast king of fierce in face steps in and fills the void. And in the latter time of their rule, when the transgressors have filled up their measure, a sovereign, fierce of face, and skilled at intrigues shall stand up, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power, and he shall destroy incredibly, and shall prosper and thrive, and destroy mighty men and the set apart people. And through his skill, he shall make deceit prosper in his hand, and hold himself to be great in his heart, and destroy many who are at ease, and even stand against the prince of princes, which we read about that earlier in Revelation. They come against Yahushua HaMashiach with his army. Yet without hand, he shall be broken. Isn't that right? With the sword coming out of Yahushua HaMashiach's mouth, he is broken. And of course, the stone kingdom, the 144,000 that are also probably making up Yahushua's army. So Yahushua and the New Jerusalem, in my understanding from reading scriptures, operate from the clouds of the first heaven toward this, in this time period, if you will. Because Yahushua doesn't stand and set foot on this defiled earth on the Mount of Olives until the very end. And we know Satan, when he's loosed, he gathers the nation and they come up over the breadth of the earth. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So Yahushua and the 144,000 are very active in the last 3.5 years and are victorious at the end of the years. The 144,000, they are continuing the witness to encourage people not to have this great falling away, because people are going to be so disoriented. They're going to be so scared. There's going to be a great falling away because so many have already been led astray by Christian Zionism. And so many are going to be led astray. The 144,000 that are going to be sealed are going to be ministering to the people to receive Yahushua HaMashiach. Don't take the mark. It is so critical during this time period that Yahweh sends out even angelic messenger with the gospel message to every tongue, tribe, people, and nation, telling them, do not take the mark. Do not take the mark. If you take the mark of the beast, it changes the hard drive of your DNA. You are no longer who you are. You become a beast. And that is the abomination within our bodily temple, because the enemy is out to destroy not only the physical structures that relate to Yahusha, but also the spiritual structure within us that Yahweh created. So we saw that at the end of this 7-year time frame in Revelation 19:11, but I'd go on into about verse 18, that Yahushua HaMashiach and his heavenly army defeat the beast and false prophet, and they're thrown into the lake of fire right here. And we see at that time that coincides with the Day of Atonement. And the nations were enraged, and your wrath has come, and the time of the dead to be judged, and to give the reward to your servants, the prophets, to the set apart ones, and to those who fear your name, small and great, and to destroy those who destroy the earth. So this would possibly be what is numbered as the 120th Jubilee. We did the math last week to consider. It's a hypothesis. It seems like it may have a lot of weight that goes with it. But during the marriage supper of the Lamb in the 7th millennium, Satan is bound for 1,000 years. But then again, we already saw, we reviewed this, that he's loose right here. And he goes out to lead the nations astray, which are in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together for battle. And this takes place when the 1,000 years have ended and Satan is released from his prison. That's when he gathers the nations again. The beast had gathered the nations and came against Yahusha and the heavenly army here. They're defeated. They're thrown into the lake of fire. But when Satan is released here after the 1,000 years, he goes to the nations and leads them astray to gather them together for battle, whose number is as the sand of the sea. And they came up. This is the earth. This is what I see as the New Jerusalem. They came up over the breadth of the earth and surrounded the camp of the set apart ones and the beloved city, and fire came down from Elohim out of the heaven and consumed them. So Satan and Gog and Magog nations are consumed by Elohim. And the devil who led them astray was thrown into the lake of fire and sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet are, and they shall be tortured day and night forever and ever. And then the 8th great day begins, the 8th millennium, the time of new beginnings, the coming day of Yahweh. See, a day shall come for Yahweh, and your spoil shall be divided in your midst. And I shall gather all the nations to battle against Jerusalem, and the city shall be taken, and the houses plundered, and the women ravished. Half of the city shall go into exile, but the remnant of the people shall not be cut off from the city. And Yahweh shall go forth, and he shall fight against those nations as he fights in the day of battle. And in that day his feet shall stand upon the Mount of Olives, which faces Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall be split in two from east to west, a very great valley. And half of the mountain shall move toward the north, and half of it toward the south. And you shall flee to the valley of my mountain, for the valley of the mountains reaches to Atzel. And you shall flee as you fled from the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, sovereign of Yehudah. And Yahweh my Elohim shall come, all the set apart ones with you. And in that day it shall be, there is no light, it is dark. And it shall be one day which is known to Yahweh, neither day nor night, but at evening time there shall be light. And in that day it shall be that living waters flow from Jerusalem, half of them toward the eastern sea, and half of them toward the western sea, in summer as well as in winter. And Yahweh shall be sovereign over all the earth. In that day there shall be one Yahweh, and his name one. We have run out of time, but we will begin next week and read these 21 verses in Daniel 10. Now, personally, I could keep on going forever, but I know the East Coast and other places are much later than it is here. But we'll pick up, this is a good place to pick up next week. I was hoping we would get to Daniel 10, but I had a lot to cover and a lot for y'all to take in and ponder and review once we get this recording uploaded. So we'll call it a night tonight. We'll have a Q&A, and then we'll pick up in Daniel 10 next Tuesday. So I laid a lot on you guys. I laid a lot on you guys, but it gives you a general idea. I'm not saying I have it all figured out, but I did want to put a lot of stuff on the table for y'all to munch on. And I believe I did accomplish that. Vivian, you have your hand up.
That last little part, especially as you were reading, it sure makes the 8th great day so very much important.
Yes.
Don't care how many times I'd been told or maybe not told or thought about it, but somehow as you were consecutively going through there, and I just thought, wow, we should be every time we come to the 8th great day, just like screaming out, knowing that that has a great fulfillment for us at the end.
Yes. And that is why it's so important for us to know the Moedim. And that's why the enemy has worked so diligently to change the times and the laws, change the times of Shabbat. The enemy doesn't want us worshiping Yahweh on his Shabbat. They substituted Sunday. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here. And the enemy doesn't want us to know about Yahweh's feast days. They just want us to get tied down with these man-made feast days that worship the beast and that are based all about consumerism and driving people into debt. So the Moedim, the feast days, play a huge part in the pattern of the last days. So, and we know that Yahweh is going to move and act based on his Moedim. Yes, Betty?
I just have a quick question. Just because I like to check these out because of, you know, following what other people are teaching. Do you see the Khazars the same as the Ashkenazi, like Matthew does?
Yes.
It sounds like the same.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Yes, Sharon.
Have y'all been following what's going on in Canada?
I have heard a few things about internment camps and stuff being built.
Well, there was a man on a council there, and he came out and put out, you have to read it, And he was telling about how they have come in and told them they're already socialism kind of up there anyway, where they come in and they're going to tell you, well, we're going to give you a jubilee. We'll pay off your mortgage and all your debt. But it's the IMF coming in there and giving you this jubilee. And in that, you have to take the shot and the series of other shots that come after that. And you don't own anything anymore under a universal income. And you won't be able to buy and sell unless you have all that. So I just see some of that in Daniel, how they're setting it up to where this system that they're just going to lock everybody down. Mm-hmm. And I just kind of like, yeah, people, please just get out of debt, because they won't be able to come after you until they finish with everybody else, basically wanting to get them to take the shot in the fact that, we'll pay off all your debt. Like a lot of people haven't been able to pay their mortgages or, their electric or whatever. And so
exactly,
they're going to bring that full force that now you got to pay it,
Yeah, it's very important to get out of debt because of debtor's prison, if you will.
That is exactly what
that's a tool that Satan uses.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's debtor's prison. And that's why when I look at when I was very young and 4 years old, be not in debt to the debtor, why'd they take that out? I mean, the debtor is basically who anybody can take away from Yah, basically. So that was just my thought on that. But anyway, I just thought I'd throw that out there because the IMF has been going around taking countries all over. About maybe 5 years ago, there were 7 that were sovereign, and Iran is the last sovereign country. And so they wanted to make all countries under the dollar. Okay. Mm-hmm. So Iran is the last one. And yeah, I mean, I'm seeing this war because they're not going to give. And that's where this war to make everybody come under that same thing, like Canada's going to be just the same one world, everything. So, but they have to take Iran down first,
Yeah, and that map showing the Shiite and the Sunni, I mean, that really spoke volumes to me. And I don't know what to say, but Yahweh gives me most of this the week prior to our sessions. Wow. And he brought all this together. And so all praise and glory to him. But for me to come across just the right maps and everything, and it gave me clearer understanding of who that ram consists of. And remember in our scripture reading in Daniel that no one could help. There was no one to help the ram.
That's right.
Who could come against the goat, the he-goat? The he-goat was a superpower. Who could stand against that beast? So it's very, very interesting. And like you said, the Shiite nations are holding out. They're holding out. And in a way, it's given us a little bit more time, a little bit more breathing room, if you will.
I just say, brothers and sisters, when Libby was talking about that great 8th day, live that now. Live it now, so that there can be nothing that Satan can put in your way. I mean, he can't anyway, because if the Ruach lives in us, he can't destroy Yahusha who lives in us. He can't touch us. And that's why, it's constantly the lies being thrown at you. And you just got to remember, and Yah's not going to destroy himself who lives in us, and Satan can't touch you. Now, he can make things in your mind, and he's been attacking me pretty good. But part of that is like, okay, Abba, I got it. You're teaching me to take the emotions and not let them take over my life. And because it was so close to my husband and I, that those emotions really got where the flesh wanted to come, and the flesh wanted to come and take over. And so, but it's like we have to get away from the emotions, because when all this comes down, we can't allow our emotions to get in the way of the power, the Ruach's power in us. And that's what he's teaching us, is to die to self, back off the flesh, and just let the Ruach be completely your forefront, you know, of everything that you say, everything. And it's and Hasatan knows where to attack you. And he got me a little bit, but you know, Yah's restoring me back to some joy again, and understanding what this trial was about. So
well, good, Sharon. Praise Yah. And he's going to pour out his Ruach on the two witnesses in these last years, and more than ever has been. So his witnesses are going to be able to perform great miracles as well, because he truly doesn't want any to perish. So let's see, Kathleen, you have your hand up?
Oh, I did. When Sharon was talking, Sharon. Yeah, I thought, oh, such bribery. You know, I thought we had choices. I thought we were able to think for ourselves, you know. I don't know. Life isn't enjoyable.
Right.
When the evil wants to take over, and it's so delicate. So delicate.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
And that's why, to me, evenings like this are so important, because they just, I get so much encouragement on top of the knowledge, on top of things that come out in the study. I truly look forward to Tuesday night. Tuesday and Friday nights are the highlights of my week, and I'm always very, very thankful to be here with all you people.
Well, thank you, Betty. I think we all feel the same. Mary, you have your hand up?
Yeah, the thing is, what Sharon was saying about emotions, I just had this discussion with my grandson. I go, they are gifts that were given to us from young, our emotions, but they are never to rule us, we're to rule them.
Oh,
and he was upset about, and I said, when you get upset about not getting that hit, you know, in the baseball game or whatever, I said, you need to take control of your emotion and not let it get the best of you. You need to stop it and rule it and say, no, you're not allowed to get me this upset. And I said, you have the choice to be happy right now. It's all in your mind. You can choose to be happy or be upset and dwell on that. So
that's right, Mary. A good, very good word. Very, very good word. That's probably the word for the night, you know, what y'all have brought forth there. And very good. That's right. Because emotions are tough. They're tough. They're powerful. But we do have to call them into.
But it doesn't give us anything we can't handle. And that we have to remember. Now, there's times where I like to say, you know, can we have a cup of coffee and discuss it, you know? But you sure I can handle this, you know? But no, I have to remember he won't do anything that I can't handle.
Yes, indeed. Very good. Thanks, Mary. There was.
And can I just have one prayer request later on for my niece? She when she was just they found a tumor in her brain, and it's like 20% of women only really get this particular tumor, and so you know, my sister's trying to find the right surgeon to do the job that has done it before, because it's very rare. But I'm praying that y'all uses this for the good, because my sister, she's Catholic, but she's atheist, and she believes in reincarnation. She goes to Satan. She, you know, she's all over the page. And I'm hoping that she sees Yahweh through this.
And this
because
is her daughter?
Yeah, and her daughter's born again. Yes.
Okay. Okay. And what's her first name?
Sue.
Sue?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's go ahead and lift her up in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we lift up Sue to you, as well as we lift up the others that we mentioned earlier, Yah. We just ask that you lead and guide Sue to the right solution to have this tumor removed or miraculously healed and taken away by you. We know that by your stripes, she is healed. And we pray that you use, and we know that you use all things together for good for those that love you and are called according to your purpose. So we pray that all of this can be used to also be a testimony as Sue goes through this process to draw others closer to you. Lead, guide, and direct her steps, and cover her with the angel of Yahweh, give her ministering angels when she's feeling down and out, give her messaging angels for a fresh word through other believers, and give her guardian angel to watch over her as she processes all that's happening in her life and how it will also affect her family. Just show her great compassion, give her strength, and tell her not to fear. Fear not, for you are with her. Be not dismayed, because you are her Elohim. You will strengthen her, you will help her, you will uphold her with your righteous right hand. We give you all praise and glory. In the name of Yahushua HaMashiach, let it be so.
Let it be so.
Let it be so. Kathleen, you have your hand up?
Yeah. I often think about the Ruach. Sin against the Ruach, right? Like that was more or less like as if in the Pentecostal church area type thing. But we never think of it that way, as sinning against the Ruach, do we?
No, we don't. We sure don't. You know, one thing that, you know, when I put these together for us on Tuesday nights, he always has something, he has a lot for me in this whole process. But I thought what was really interesting that he brought out to me while I was bringing this together, while I was trying to do these graphics to help convey and to explain these different time periods, because honestly, I don't really see how anyone can explain Revelation and these timelines without graphics, because there's so many things to consider. When you start making your own timeline and taking little segments of scripture and saying, okay, where is this taking place? Where is this taking place? Well, what was very clear tonight was clearly how the beast and the false prophet beast are cast into the lake of fire at the end of the 7 years. But then you have Satan bound. And to read those scriptures again, when Satan is released and he goes to the four corners of the earth and gathers the nations together, that is a lot for us to take in and ponder.
Yeah,
right there. You know, that's why I see the New Jerusalem not being on the earth yet. I don't think that takes place until a new heaven and a new earth is made. And then the New Jerusalem will come and settle down on the earth. But that's a lot to get your head wrapped around. Or, you know, because we are with the marriage supper of the Lamb. And apparently there's lots of things happening in the nations. They numbered as the sand on the sea, on the shore. That's a lot to ponder right there. Just that in itself. When they come up over the breadth of the earth to come after the set apart ones that are in the presence of Yahusha at the marriage supper of the Lamb setting, New Jerusalem, they're coming up over the breadth of the earth and Elohim consumes them. Wow. I mean, that's some wow stuff right there. And I still have to chew on that a little bit longer myself to ponder the sequence. And it talked about, it said, and this is the first resurrection. And it said that the rest of the dead are not resurrected until after the 1,000 years. So that's a lot to take in. That's all I can say. It's a lot to take in, to ponder that. It takes place over a time period there. And also we have to ponder those points in Revelation, like when the two witnesses are slain by the beast coming out of the pit, and after 3.5 days, they're called up to heaven. That's interesting. If that's the church of Smyrna and the church of Philadelphia that have been faithful to Yahweh and never got condemnation, is that a catching away, which some would call a rapture, even though that term is not in the Bible? Is that a catching away? I like to call them catching aways. I like to correlate them to the feast harvest time periods, because he does everything according to his feast days. And there's first fruits harvest with each season, the spring harvest, the harvest of the wheat at Pentecost, the harvest of the grapes and the olives in the fall. So we have to remember that, and we have to remember that when the child is birthed in Revelation 12, the child is caught up to the throne room of Elohim. And we know that child is Israel born from above, with Yahushua HaMashiach as the head. So again, those are interesting things to ponder. Yes, Sharon, you have your hand up.
Going back to when you were talking about the people going up to the New Jerusalem, and if you look at where it says that the people are sea, well, how deep is our sea? We don't even know how deep the sea is. Can you imagine the amount of people that are at the depth of the sea that can reach up to that New Jerusalem? And that was a picture I had of how many people. That's like sands of the sea, thousands of people that are coming, that Satan's using and deceiving to come up to the New Jerusalem. It was just kind of a thought that came through my head. And I was thinking of something you said way back in the lesson, and I can't find it, but he was talking about that if you're doing his will and you're walking it out, that there is no man that can judge you, because you're doing the will of the Father. And
that's
again,
right.
He lives in you, you will not sin. He says that in John 9, first.
I know what you're talking about.
3, 9, 10. Yeah. So, and again, I found another verse in chapter 9 of John that was saying that Yah does not hear a sinner's prayer. And I was like, boom, boom, boom. He's giving me all those where people are saying that. I hear people say they're sinners. They're sinners. I hear people say that, and I'm going, well, aren't you going to repent? Even though they're reading the Bible. And I'm going, wait a minute. You can't be a sinner, and you can't be being brought to perfection. Okay. That is what Noah was, being brought to perfection morally and in the Torah. So you can't walk two sides of the fence here. You have to make a choice. And so, yes, I mean, when we don't know that something is a sin and Yah brings it to us, we confess that sin. Mm-hmm. And what does he say? He's faithful and just to forgive. But it's like people, I guess this is a church thing, because I remember saying we were in the church and they were still telling us we were sinners, even though we were supposed to be saved or walking this salvation walk. And it just never made sense to me, because I said, well, then what good is it to go to church and learn and you keep on learning and nothing ever changes? It just did not make sense to me. So anyway, it's a walk of being perfected on this journey down the path that he's already made. We just have to walk it out, and victory, and the death is defeated and victory's already done. I'm sorry, I'm getting on preaching. Sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. Preach on, Sharon. Preach on.
Hey, Sharon, thank you for that. That pointed something out that hadn't occurred to me, and it's so obvious once you said it. Thank you.
You're welcome. And what I know, it's such a freedom when you really realize how valuable we are to our Abba, to Yahweh. We're so valuable to him, because it's like, how do I show you? And I believe that what I'm seeing now is he wants us to know about all the trees and the herbs and everything. And so he's really taken us to those things now to show that I have been here the whole time. My creation has been here entirely for your healing and has always been here, and I've never left you or forsake you. And so therefore we need to learn about the food and the herbs that he has given us, that we just totally go to the grocery store for. And so I think he's trying to show us, man, I've been here the whole time, just waiting for you to take recognition of what I've given you from the very beginning. And that's so right. With that, it's like, okay, once we recognize that, I mean, he can do miracles, but he wants us to see I've been here the whole time.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Okay. Well, I don't see any more hands raised, so I hope I didn't overwhelm y'all. I hope it kind of made sense how I was bringing those together. Hope that painted a picture. And
I'm going to have to really study that very last part of your graphs, because it doesn't match with what's been put in my head. And it's one of those things that I think I need to do a rerun on. But and do your own end time 7-year, or some may just believe in 3.5 year, but get your timelines and draw it out on a piece of paper and try to lay this out. Where would you put them? And, because that was one thing, Charlene has done throughout her book. Has all these graphics to help us understand things. And then last week we saw some glimpses of Shauna's timelines, and that helped me track with timelines some, even though I might move some of those timelines in different places. Like the 1335 timeline, we haven't even gotten to that one yet, but she puts it that it goes to the very end, where I kind of want to put it at the first 3.5, because it said something like, blessed are those that make it to the 1335, which is a little bit beyond the 1260 timeline, if there's more than one 1260.
You know, so because we know that we're going to see a great falling away first, and we know that the son of perdition or the beast is going to be revealed, the anti-Messiah. So we may see that for a few days before maybe we as the two witnesses are caught up to heaven, or we're taken to the wilderness for the next 3.5 years, whichever it may be. Yes, Sharon?
You were saying something earlier about the 12:16, and then you said a verse there, and I wish I could have stopped that point in time, but it was like right there, there's 45 days. He's saying that those who make it to this time, okay, which you said, do you remember how you said it?
On the 1335 that we haven't even reached yet, I believe it says something like those that make it to the 1335 mark are blessed.
There, right there. So if we're making it to the 1335 days, if you subtract the 1335 from the 12, whatever, you get 45 days. And you look at that during the timeline of when we're sealed, which I believe will be at Passover, because he sealed the nothing new under the sun. He's always repeating. So he sealed the Hebrew, the first Passover. He sealed them on the doorpost. Okay, death had nothing on him. Well, death has nothing on us either. So yeah. And I, Livia, I'm going to just say this. I believe we are sealed.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But
Yeah,
there's a unification or oneness that will seal us all together as one.
Yeah, and I believe that maybe the 144,000 are sealed more specifically because I think they have a greater role, if you will, if they serve as his army. I'm not sure, but it does specifically mention a sealing that is done by the angel. So I don't know if that's a different kind of sealing.
I think it's a different one, but I think you're there. I mean, yes. I mean, I agree with what you've taught, and very much so. The other thing is, this one thing that I didn't capture in any of the stuff was he talks about, oh gosh, I think it's in chapter, I don't remember the chapter right now, but he talks about 5 months. So there's a 5 months, which is the same thing that happened to Noah. He had 5 months that he was on the ark. Okay, that was a protected time with Yah when it was 5 months. So that's 150 days, isn't it? So 5 months, yes. Those 150 days, I believe, is something calculated in there, but I haven't really looked at it. So, I mean, but that 5 months, and going back to the days of Noah, like he always is saying that, and then bringing it forward, has something to do with that timeline too.
Yeah, but that's Revelation 9:5.
9:5, yeah, and the 144,000 is also mentioned in there. I think somewhere around the second or third verse somewhere. Is it not?
They're mentioned more in, I think, Revelation 7 and I believe 14. Yeah, Revelation 7 and Revelation 14. And
but he also, 9 is one, but he also 14, I think, also talks about the 144,000 and that 5 months there as well. Real quick. Okay, wait a minute.
Oh yeah.
There it is. Okay. He's talking about 14, the first verse. I looked and I saw the Lamb standing in Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having the Father's name written upon their foreheads. Oh, I know there's the 5 months in here somewhere.
And then in Revelation 9:4, it says, and it was said to them that they should not harm the grass of the earth or any green matter or any tree, but only those men who do not have the seal of Elohim upon their foreheads. So it indirectly is referring to the 144,000 there in Revelation 9 as well. And it was given to not kill, but to torture them for 5 months and they're tortured like the torture of a scorpion when it stings a man.
Okay, and then it goes up to verse 10 where he's talking about those 5 months, but you know, he's talking about, and they had a tail like I always like to emphasize these words, like a scorpion and sting, and in the tail is their authority to harm the men for 5 months. I mean, I'm wondering where that is in that timeline, and you know, anyway.
That's a good question. I don't have the 5 months in any of my timelines.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But it's all referring back to the days of Noah and the 5 months he was protected. So I'm not sure where all that fits in.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to be 5 months, you know, I don't know. I mean, I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's why it's good to make your end time timeline graph, because that's when you really have to study the scripture and figure out where would you put this stuff. And that's why I ponder, I don't only see the 1260 timeline relating to the rule of the beast from when he breaks that agreement to the very end. He's given 42 months, that's 1260 days. And we know it applies to the latter half of the 3.5 years, but I think that may have some application to the first 3.5 years, and it may be the 2 witnesses, because it becomes more intense in the latter 3.5 years, because you have the 144,000 also reinforcing the gospel and witnessing to the people to stand firm and stuff. So those are things that swirl around in this head of mine. I mean, I can wake up in the middle of the night and I'm putting timelines together in my head, you know, well, would that fit there? Maybe, you know, I'm talking to myself.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Well, we're blessed by all your hard work, and thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Betty.
Yes, thank you.
I hope it's helping us understand a little bit more. Okay, my French Mary. All right.
Well, shalom, everybody. I'm going to sign off, but you have a blessed rest of your week.
All right. I think we're all about ready to sign off as well, Betty. Shalom, everybody. Find those PDFs, Vivian.
Hello.
You'll find them.
Hello.
See the chat.
Okay.
Shalom, shalom.
Shalom, Donna. Shalom, Sarah. Nice to have you. Nice to have you, Dr. Woods, Catherine, and Sarah.
Thank you.
Glad you could join.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye, Kathleen and Jason.
Bye, Catherine. Kathleen.
Good night, Vivi.
Bye, Mary. Bye, Kathleen. Bye, Jason.